And welcome everybody tonight to the last few chapters of Galatians. And we're going to be hitting a kind of a controversial, I guess, provocative anyway, part of Paul's writing. And so I'm going to present some ideas written by D. Thomas Lancaster in his book that I've been using, and then we'll put a little bit of historical context in with it too, because I had not, some of this before I started it, I hadn't even realized some of the things that Paul was bringing out here that was part of their history or part of their daily life out there. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and read the scripture for tonight for those who are on the telephones. Galatians 3:26 and 29. For you are all sons of God through trusting in Messiah Yeshua. For all of you who were immersed in Messiah have clothed yourselves with Messiah. There is neither Jew nor Greek, neither slave nor free. There is neither male nor female. For you are all one in Messiah Yeshua, and if you belong to Messiah, then you are Abraham's seed, heirs according to the promise. Now, last week, if you remember, we discussed the idea of the Torah being described as a pedagogos, a slave or an employee of a rich family whose job it was to take the son to and from school and to ensure that the son didn't deviate from the straight and narrow. And so this week we're going to kind of depart from that and going back into kind of Paul's mantra, I guess it was, where he summarizes in verse 26, summarizes Paul's his message that faith in Yeshua results in being a child of God. It's the faith. And so one of the things that, might be worth checking into or just thinking about anyway is faith alone good enough? James, in his epistle said that faith without works is dead. We've talked about that. And the Galatian influencers, the guys that Paul is writing about, they emphasize the works ahead of faith in God. And so today, and we see today's hyper grace movement, I guess I don't know if it's a movement or just teaching, downplays works altogether in favor of grace or faith alone. And so I think the truth kind of lies in the middle. Neither one of those are correct, and the truth is actually in the middle. So in verse 27, we see, I kind of skipped over it before I started studying for this tonight, the idea of the immersion. And we see that Paul is placing circumcision kind of down a notch from where the influencers had placed it. For the influencers, circumcision and legal conversion to Judaism was the first step to salvation, and that was what proved a person had a place in the world to come, was this ritual conversion and circumcision. But Paul kind of turns that over, and he uses the ritual of immersion not as a prerequisite to salvation, but as an outward declaration of faith in Yeshua. So I think David Stern in the Complete Jewish Bible says it this way. He says, as many of you as were immersed into the Messiah have clothed yourselves with the Messiah. Now, immersion was nothing new to the people back in Paul's day. So, it was, they had a mikvah, and you did the immersion of the mikvah for various reasons. It could be for a cleansing, or a woman after giving childbirth, or on monthly she would go to offer an offering and do the mikvah, and there's various other things. So the idea of immersion was not a new thing. It was just that Paul was kind of elevating that to say, okay, this is the outward declaration or outward. I guess declaration is the best word, that that you have come to faith in Yeshua. So it did, it's a sign of a change in status, I guess, would be a good way of saying that. Thanks, Ray. So, but I kind of just, missed out on that when thinking about the immersion, or reading about the immersion side of things, as opposed to the circumcision, and just kind of went right over that. So it's another thing that just kind of popped up, and so let's go on to finally, we get into this, the title of the lesson here tonight, that we get to the Jew or the Greek. And Paul expressed a similar concept in sentiment in Colossians 3:11. It says, "Here there is no longer Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, savage, slave, and free, but Messiah is all in all." And then he wrote something similar again in the 2nd chapter of Ephesians, where he spoke of Jewish and Gentile believers combined into a one new man. Now, it said in Ephesians, I turned 2 pages over. He did this, it's in Ephesians 2:15 and 16, and he said, he did this in order to create within himself one new man from the two groups, making shalom, making peace, and to reconcile both to God in one body through the cross, by which he put the hostility to death. In summary, Paul taught that there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, circumcised, uncircumcised, barbarian or Scythian is one of the words that was used. Instead, we are one in Messiah as the one new man. Now, these sentiments run at the very heart of Paul's theology, and they express the center or the heart of his unique gospel of Gentile inclusion. His teaching was extremely it was controversial at the time, and it was a new teaching. It was something that they had just, that no one else was teaching that at the time. So the idea of the Gentile inclusion. So he was definitely a pioneer in his day. So, well, we'll go on with in this. There we go. This one new man thing. I guess it's actually kind of developed into a theology, and you see a lot that same theme a lot within the Messianic movement, and so in the broader Christian world, and actually in church history over the last 1700 years, since about 300 AD, this particular text back up in Galatians there, neither Jew nor Greek, has been shown to used to show that Jewish people, after coming to faith, are no longer really Jewish. Instead, they have become a new thing, a Christian. Therefore, they need no longer practice Jewish rituals or matters of Torah like circumcision, dietary laws, Sabbath calendar, and so forth. And as we've talked about in previous lessons, where when Jews came to faith, they were always, they had to go just assimilate into the Christian church, give up their Judaism. And in fact, during some of the times of forced conversion, that was one of the things that the church did to the Jews, is that they made them give up all of their their practices of Judaism, of their culture, and basically leave their whole ethnic identity behind. So of course the opposite of that was that in no way, however, is the Jewish Christian obligated. What they're saying there is that there's no way that the Jewish Christian is obligated to keep the Torah or marry within the Jewish people or raise Jewish children, because after all, there is no difference between Jews and Gentiles in Messiah. And we call this the one new man theology. The one who espouses one new man theology actually implies that there are no Jews in Messiah whatsoever. Jewishness is erased by the Messiah. The Messiah obliterates the identity of the distinctive people of Israel, the heirs of the forefathers, the people of the covenant. It just does away with all of that, because now there's no Jew and no Greek. So for the most of the last 2,000 years, this is what happened to every Jewish person who became a believer. The Jewish person who becomes a Christian marries a Christian. She marries a Christian, or their children do, and within a generation or two, they've lost their Jewish their identity. The people are, their whole identity as a Jew has been lost. And this is kind of ironic because Christianity, there's some in Christianity anyway. They bemoan the fact that Jewish people are so hard to reach with the gospel. And Christians wonder, why are there so few Jewish believers? But where are the Jewish believers, the Christian asks. Moreover, Christian missions to the Jewish people, they continue to focus on Jewish evangelism, and yet it seems that Jewish believers are so rare. And we see generation after generation of Jewish missions. They talk about when the great harvest of Jewish souls will happen. But it's a little bit of irony here. The hundreds and thousands and who knows how many Jewish people have come to faith in Messiah over the years, and they've and even in the last century, they've come to faith. And but where are they? Where are the Jewish people? Who would know? For instance, I'm just thinking about Alfred Edersheim. Here he was a Jewish guy that he came to faith in Yeshua. He was really high up in the I think it was the Presbyterian Church in England, and the concept of his Jewishness really never comes into play because he's no longer Jewish. He is a Christian, and that happened over and over and over again. That the Jewish people lost their legacy of faith because of their faith in Yeshua. They were forced, or however it occurred. Through this teaching and through this verse that they were no longer Jewish, and now that you're the one new man says, now that you are a Christian, there's no difference between you and us, and you may marry our children, and our children may marry yours, and you no longer need to be Jewish or keep kosher or keep Sabbath or anything else that would preserve your identity a Jew. You are no longer under the law, and so I think for that reason. Jewish Christians, they're just doomed. They're swallowed up by the church and stripped of their Jewish identity and just absorbed, assimilated into Gentileness. And so what happens is because of this no difference between Jew and Gentile Messiah, they're saying, but really what they're saying is that there's no Jew in Messiah. The one new man is always a Gentile. It's funny to me sometimes when we remind somebody that I've done this. Yes, Jesus was a Jew, and the funny look on some people's face is like, oh yeah, He was, wasn't he? You know, and it kind of messes with their theology, and then you really mess with them when you say, and so were all of the disciples, and so were all of the believers in Yeshua for the first 15 years. Were all Jews. The tens of thousands, actually, tens of thousands of them. Who knows how many people were a part of the way. Anyway, that's it's kind of a tragedy when you look at it that the Jewish people, and we see it today. People have told me, how can you be Jewish and believe in Jesus? You just can't do it. You lose your Jewishness if you believe in Jesus. Even that's what the Jewish people have been taught. So we'll go on here, and then in Messianic Judaism, we do not think this one new man part. That's not our thing. So let's just reverse the values. And in Messiah, there's really no Jew nor Greek, because the Gentiles are the ones that are grafted into Israel. We are all one new man. So some Gentiles in the Messianic Judaism, and this is a thought between various schools within Messianic Judaism that interpret this to mean, for all practical purposes, Gentile believers in Messiah are exactly the same as the Jewish people. Both the Jews and Gentiles have the same covenantal responsibilities, the same duties, the same obligations. And we've actually attended a group in Mississippi where they did that. That's if you were a believer in Yeshua, then by necessity you must be you're Jewish. There's no difference between a Jewish person by blood and the Jewish person by the blood of Yeshua, or becoming a believer in Yeshua. So as the one new man, both Jews and Gentiles are obligated to keep the whole Torah. Because of that, a Gentile is not really distinguishable from a Jew. This theology is popularly called the one law theology. Some believe this, and even on this class, some believe it, some of us don't. So it is based on passages such as Exodus 12:49. There shall be one law for the native and the stranger who sojourns among you. Now, the one law theology is the belief that Jewish people should keep the whole Torah, just as the Bible teaches. But Gentiles fall in the same category as Jewish people, so they should too. In fact, the Gentile believers are obligated to do so, because there is neither Jew nor Gentile in Messiah. We are all the same. Rather than Jews assimilating into the Gentile Christian identity under one law, Gentiles assimilate into the Messianic Jewish identity. And so this line of thought is I think what Paul was teaching, that against. That was his theological opponents in Galatia, except that in the one law Messianic Gentile theology, the Gentile never makes a legal conversion, meaning that they don't actually do a ritual conversion and circumcision and so forth. He adopts the identity and the obligations of a convert, but does not do so through the Jewish community. Now, I have known some people who have actually done that, who've gone back to a Jewish standard, say a conservative synagogue, and they go through all of the classes, and in some cases have even gone through the circumcision, and they get a certificate that says, okay, now you're Jewish, and so now you can marry this nice Jewish girl. And so I've known guys that have actually done that very thing. And then they tell me with a smile, it says, but, the rabbi never did ask me what I thought about Jesus. So I never had to say. And so, but they went through that so they could have the certificate in their hand so that then they could marry the Jewish girl. So, I mean, it happens. So there's one thing, though, I think, we'll probably get into it here in a little bit. Go ahead with this. In the one law theology has not, it's not had the 1800-year run like the one new man theology has, but I think we can predict the results are the same. By making all Gentiles the same as Jewish believers, but without becoming Jewish, we effectively accomplish the same results as the Christian one new man theology. The one law theology neutralizes Jewish identity, dilutes it, and eliminates it. In my mind, sometimes this stuff is kind of a subtle form of replacement theology, although people will kind of, they vehemently deny that that's what they're doing. But in reality, I think that's the effect that it has. And so the Gentile believer has the same legal status as a Jewish person, and this opens the possibility for and probability of intermarriage. It erases any definable borders which could be used to define who is Jewish and who is not Jewish. Now, I think this could only occur like within the Messianic congregations or within the Messianic sphere of things. So, certainly in the what we would say the mainstream Judaism, you don't have that thing. They just have assimilation. There's a problem. I read mainstream Jewish literature all the time, and they are always bemoaning the fact that the young people are marrying outside the faith, and assimilation is definitely a problem, even outside the Messianic Judaism side of things. So one law is I think is the end of Jewish identity for Jewish believers. In its place comes a new kind of pseudo-Jewish Gentile identity in which differentiation between the two vanishes. A one-law Messianic Gentile, for all practical purposes, would be the same as a Jewish person. This spells extinction of a distinct Jewish identity for Jewish believers as surely as the other does. I cannot tell you how many times within a Messianic setting or within a Christian setting, I have heard people come up to me and they'll say, they'll say something like, they said, well, are you Jewish? And I say, yes. And they says, well, I'm grafted in, so that makes me Jewish too. And so kind of I tell them, not so much. And then we get into a discussion about that. But it's a thought that is kind of pervasive within some Christian circles. Certainly the Christian circles that I don't run in, but I'm in anyway, because we discuss with people. We have opportunity to discuss with them, and it's a very common thought with them that, okay, if I'm grafted in, I'm the same as I am a Jew. And I said, well, no, you're a Gentile in the commonwealth of Israel, and that kind of thought is just it boggles their mind. And so we have some good discussions that way. Now, the one law interpretation of one new man is exactly the same as the Christian interpretation, except for one difference. The one new man theology says, since we are the same in Messiah, Jewish believers need not keep the Jewish aspects of Torah anymore. And the one law theology says, since we are the same in Messiah, we all need to keep the Jewish aspects Torah. So, there's a dichotomy there. And I think this is obviously counter to what Paul was teaching, because he maintained the cultural differences between the Jews and the Gentiles. You could call it Paul's rule for churches. And I think that's let's see, David Rudolph came up with that little phrase in one of his books. It said that it's Paul's rule for churches. It says Gentiles do not need to take the commandments which identify this was what Paul had written, that Gentiles do not need to take on the commandments which identify a person as Jewish, like the circumcision. We all agree that he never taught that if a Gentile became a believer, that he had to be circumcised. He taught exactly the opposite. Now, and he says, and his other thing was, Gentiles do not need to be Jewish in order to be reckoned as part of the Jewish, or as part of the people of God. And the scripture for this is in 1 Corinthians 7:17 through 18. It says, only as the Lord has assigned to each one, as God has called each, let him walk in this way. I give this rule in all of Messiah's communities. There, his rule for the churches. Was anyone called when he already had been circumcised? Let him not make himself uncircumcised. Has anyone been called while uncircumcised? Let him not allow himself to be circumcised. And Paul, he told the Jewish believers not to remove the marks of circumcision. And I believe he was probably, there are those that says he was actually talking about physical, the physical surgical procedure, and it's called an epispasm. If in case you wanted to know, but I think what he was talking about, instead of an actual surgical reversal here, is that he was saying, don't remove the marks of circumcision, meaning don't remove the marks of your Jewish culture, like of being Jewish, like the Brit Milah, the circumcision of the male babies on the 8th day. Don't give up your Torah observant. Don't give up the Sabbath, the biblical calendar, the Levitical functions, the dietary laws, tzitzit, tefillin, mezuzah, and that just generally the practice of Judaism. Paul is saying, don't give up that if you're Jewish. He didn't. He never gave up any of it. In other words, Paul told the Jews, do not assimilate into a Jewish identity or forsake the Torah and forsake your heritage. So, we get confused sometimes that oneness is not sameness. Paul said that there was neither slave nor free. Let's go. I'll stick with my notes here instead of rambling. Consider the neither slave nor free part. Paul said that in Messiah there is neither slave nor free, but in his epistles, Paul instructed slaves to serve their masters faithfully, diligently, not begrudgingly. He told slave owners to treat their slaves honorably, and he told free men not to become enslaved to another. So clearly there is a difference. Even in the Messiah, there were still slaves. Slaves were slaves. Free men were free men. And they have different roles and responsibilities. Now, what about the male and female part there? Paul said that in Messiah there is no male or female. If that is the case, then why do conservative Christians object to the prospect of the same-sex marriages? If there's no difference between male and female, hey, why not? That's a little off the deep end, I admit. If there's no difference, what difference does it make? Clearly, though, men are still men and women are still women, even in Messiah. And I say to that, vive la différence. in Messiah, Jew and Gentile are one, but not the same. As regards salvation, our standing in the Messiah, there is no difference between Jew and Gentile, as the Apostle Peter declared it's Acts 15:9. He says, he made no distinction between us and them, having cleansed their hearts by faith. So Jews, Gentiles, men, women, slaves, freemen have the same access to salvation through the same Messiah. But that does not eliminate our distinctive identities and roles. And I think in another way, Paul was talking about, another way of looking at this, he was talking about unity in the body. And the body of Messiah has many parts, but we almost work together in harmony for the good of the entire body. It's like in our own physical bodies. We got a head, we got a hand, we got feet. None of those are the same, and yet each one has a distinct function that you need it for your body. Your heart is not your liver. Your liver does not pump blood, and the heart doesn't cleanse the blood. You have to have all of these different ones together to make the body work correctly. And so same as in the body of Messiah, we are all in the body, the Jew and the Gentile, slave, free, male, female. We're all in the body of Messiah, and we're all nourished by the blood. The Bible speaks of the life in the blood, and so it says we are all nourished and sustained and given life through the blood of Yeshua. Now, I think Paul was also addressing a concept in his day. Now, why did he pick these three classes of people? Like race or nationality. He talked about the Jew and the Greek, and in other places talk about the barbarian, the Scythian. I don't know what a Scythian is. Sounds like something from Star Trek. But the social status, meaning the slave or the free, and the gender status, male or female. Why did he do that? Actually, there was a lot within the common the laws and the literature of the day. They made these distinctions, and even there is a Jewish Siddur that if you get one of the older ones, and I think maybe some of the more modern ones have changed this a little bit, but the older Jewish Siddurs said, "I thank God that I was not born a heathen or a sinner." You remember the prayer that the Pharisee prayed. He was saying, "I thank God that I am not born a sinner like this guy next to me." And of course, Yeshua denounced that type of prayer. It also said, I thank God that I was not born, that I was born free and not a slave. And then the last one, of course, which is the not politically correct one that they probably have to change now, is that I thank God that I was born a man and not a woman. So Paul was addressing some real life prejudices of his day, where he says, no, but in Messiah, once we have accepted Yeshua the Messiah as our Savior, then we're all the same in this regard. In God's eyes, we can all come to Him equally. The Jewish guy doesn't have any he doesn't have an inside track to God's favor any more than the non-Jewish guy. The guy from Oklahoma. He's not gonna. The Jewish guy is not going to have any favor there. And in fact, there are some writings that even back in the day where they talked about the Jewish, the proselyte did not actually enjoy the same status within the synagogue as did the natural-born Jew. And because they would, there were certain things, they made comments about, well, he is a proselyte, so he really can't do this or that or the other. So there was a prejudice and a bias even in the day that Paul was addressing there about the Gentile that comes to faith in Yeshua. It comes to the Gentile that comes to become a Jew through the ritual conversion and so forth. They were considered Jewish for legal purposes, but not so much. Within there was still a bias there. So anyway, Paul was addressing those concepts, those biases that were in the world at the time, and I think he was trying to correct that and to tell people, he said, no, once you're in Messiah, Yeshua, then we're all the same. We have the same access to God, no matter who we are. The slave's prayer is just as efficacious as the king's prayer. So that was, there again, that was something that I really never had thought about before trying to study for this lesson here tonight. Finally, in the last verse, then Paul returns to his theme of being spiritual heirs of Abraham because of our faith in and the faithfulness of Yeshua. And so David Stern had summed this up in an earlier verse. He was talking about Abraham's seed, and in the written notes you can see the reference where exactly what verse he was talking about. But he's actually talking about in the seed of Abraham. What is the seed of Abraham? And it goes through like this, that these 9 points point to the who is the seed of Abraham. It says Israel is God's son. Okay, if Israel is God's son, then Messiah is God's son because they're come from Israel. And Israel is descended from Abraham. Abraham is Abraham's seed, is the children of Abraham. The true children of Abraham, though, are those who trust. Those who trust in Yeshua are united with him by that trust. They are part of his body, one with him, and it's one with him. They're combined. In the thinking of the Tanakh, a king represents his people to the point of being one with them, and that the king of Israel is treated as representing Israel, standing for them, being one with them. If you go back and look at some of the instructions God had for the kings of Israel, it says, don't have a whole bunch of horses. Don't collect a bunch of money so that you're so much different than the people that you're trying to lead. He says, don't lord it over them. Basically, God is telling the kings, hey, you are a leader, but you're not supposed to be somebody that's above all the other people. That they're going to bow down to you and like the pagan kings would, where they would set themselves up as a deity. God says, do not do that. Don't even take on to yourself the trappings of these guys, where you have lots of horses and lots of chariots and so on and so forth. So that's what David Stern is talking about here, where in the Tanakh it says to represent the people by being one of them. And so the Messiah, Yeshua, is the King of Israel, the promised son of David, one with Israel. And what did he do? The Messiah, Yeshua, became a man. He became one of us, just like the Tanakh tells the king to be one of the people. You're just one of the people. And yet you're the king, but you're still one of the people. Messiah was the Son of God, and yet he was also one of the people. So, and then by trusting, then the Gentiles become identified with, and in some sense, a part of Israel. What we're talking about in some sense being the part of the commonwealth, as it were, of Israel. And so all of God's promises reached their culmination and fulfillment in the Messiah, who was Abraham's seed. And so that is the kind of a summary given by David Stern of what is the seed of Abraham. And I think it pulls it up nicely as to what Paul was saying in that last verse, that we believe in Messiah Yeshua, then we are the spiritual sons and daughters of Abraham. And folks, that ends the prepared part of the lesson tonight. And I would like to thank all of you for being part of this and listening in, whether you listen tonight or whether you come up and listen to it on the recordings from wherever. And we are happy to note that we are getting increasing different countries and so forth, and different states and people. Each week we get new people that get on and they say they like the class, and they're reading it and listening to the recording. So I'm very grateful for that. That people are doing that, and some places that there are some countries that the people could actually be in physical danger if folks knew that they were looking at this kind of a website. So I just pray that God's protection on these people as they look in on the class and they learn about Yeshua. So all of you think in your prayers, just keep the people that are coming onto this website and this class, keep them in your prayers, because some of them do so at substantial risk to their lives and the lives of their families. So it's not like those of us that are in Houston, Texas, and we can listen to whatever we want. So anyway, that is the lesson tonight. Next week we will begin on chapter 4. And continue on through Galatians, and then I want each one of you. I wish each one of you a Shavua Tov. Have a good week, and God bless. We'll see you next week.